It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subhash Technosis is an India-based website design company. They do data entry, customer service. You can use them as your call center over there in India. They have 250 employees sitting behind computer stations waiting to work for you. If you need press releases done, content writing, website design, search engine optimization, these are all stuff that they are experts in their wheelhouse in these areas. So check out SubhashTechnosis.com. Also, guys, check out OppermanReport.com. That's my website where we have our member section. We have a lot of great extra content on there. I just uploaded a show just today. Our good friend Sean Duff from StrawmanMusic.com just uploaded a show I did this week with, what's his name? Hoagland. What's his first name? Richard Hoagland. Richard Hoagland from NASA fame and the Art Bell fame interviewed me the other night at like 2 o'clock in the morning. My God. And it was a rough interview. You might enjoy it. Okay, a very interesting show. But a lot of good stuff in the member section. We just uploaded 2 videos of the Jeffrey Epstein search warrant execution. New docs. I don't think we have any new docs up there lately, but the Trump lawsuits. We have all that stuff up there. We have the Jeffrey Epstein litigation that's going up in New York State right now, where him and Trump are being accused of raping those 2 13-year-old girls. We have their affidavits and the original complaint all up on OppermanReport.com. I want to thank Ted Rubinstein for bailing me out at the last second. Me and Ted chat quite a bit on Facebook back and forth. It was a great resource of information and little tips. Matter of fact, he just recommended a guest for me. He'll have to remind me the name. But Ted, what's that guest you just sent to me? Oh, Ted's still on mute. Sorry, Ted. Okay, Ted. You're on now. You're on now.
Michael Rothmiller is the guy's name.
Michael Rothmiller. Okay, and he got a brand new book, and he's talking about stuff with Bill Clinton, conversations about Osama bin Laden. You know what? I'm a little distracted. Go ahead. What else?
There's JFK stuff in there, too.
JFK stuff. And off the air, we spent about a half hour talking yesterday off the air about his investigation into the Marilyn Monroe murder. And he's going to be coming out with a book on that upcoming. But he's got information I don't think anybody else has. He's read the whole diaries. He's talked to the PI that put the wiretaps in Marilyn Monroe's house. He interrogated Richard Lawford. So this guy got great information. He wrote a book about L.A. PD too. I wish I had his info in front of me, but we don't. But that's why my point is, though, the Ted Rubinstein is a huge help to this show behind the scenes, always giving me little nudges and pointing me in different directions and stuff like that. And he was kind enough to agree to come on the show to talk about Danny Casolaro and the Octopus. So Ted, tell us about yourself. Who is Ted Rubinstein?
Well, I am a long-time researcher in the area of parapolitics. I would say I've been doing this about 40 years now. And I am a Berkeley graduate. And I basically started off studying the Kennedy assassination, and there were all these revelations coming out at the time about CIA and FBI malfeasance, and the fact that the Warren Commission was inadequate, and there was a big clamor for a new investigation, which also happened in the mid-'70s. And so my studies in that area sort of branched off, into organized crime and drug trafficking and the intelligence community, all the things that are part of the deep political milieu that I was referring to as parapolitics. And Peter Dale Scott was, of course, my first mentor, and still is. He's just a huge pioneer in the field. I just can't recommend his work enough. I know you've had him on your show.
Yeah, thank God for that. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
All right, so...
but also, Ted, but also, too... Wait. Mae Brussel, you've been involved with Mae Brussel, Dave Emery, you worked for Larry Flint. Okay,
let's all let out.
Yes, you did. So we have royalty here. We have Ted Rubinstein is royalty in this field of the kind of work that we do here on the Opperman Report. So Dave, we came on the show, though, to talk about Danny Casolaro and the Octopus. So give us some background on it. Yeah.
It just happens to be the 25th anniversary of his suiciding earlier this week. I'm not sure exact day, but it was this week. This is the 25th anniversary of his death. And he was a writer and investigator for basically government computer-type publications. Government computer news, stuff going on, with software development and the latest developments in computers and the government's use of them in various systems. And he came across the story that became the biggest one of his life, which involved all this malfeasance in the Justice Department, specifically around the theft of a software program called Promis, Promis, and it was developed by a couple called the Hamiltons in Washington, D.C., and it involved managing complex cases, like for prosecutors and so on, that maybe touched on various jurisdictions and went back in time, and they didn't really have this kind of software that was up to the task of what they needed it for, but it was being developed by the Hamiltons, and they were negotiators with the Justice Department to sell it to them. And this went on a long time, and it ended up being very contentious. And the Hamiltons discovered, to their shock, that at some point that the software had been stolen from them, was being used by the Justice Department, and also that the software had been made available to all kinds of foreign governments, like Israel and so on. And there was also the aspect of there had been a backdoor capability built into it. I don't know if this was what the Hamiltons developed, or whether the Justice Department people that went in and worked on it later on added to it. But the net result was that the Hamiltons were ripped off for millions of dollars by the Justice Department for this software, and they sued them. And it was in various suits and investigations that went on in Washington. And I don't know at what point, but the Justice Department, the guy from the Watergate massacre, Elliot Richardson, who was the upstanding guy who refused to fire Archibald Cox on Nixon's behalf, he ended up resigning himself rather than do that. He's definitely a white hat in this affair. He represented the Hamiltons in the suit against the Justice Department, and he definitely was trying to get to the bottom of this stuff, including what happened to Danny Casolaro, which I guess I haven't gone into.
Hey, you know what? Let me throw something out here for a second. Wait, Ted. Just recently, in the past 6 months or so, I was contacted by this woman who was trying to help this group in Colorado. That is like 5 or 6 of them, mostly members of the same family, that were thrown in prison in Colorado. Very interesting case. Now, these guys, and it's called like Free the Colorado 7, whatever it's called. And they got some federal judge on their side, too, trying to help them out, too. And they wanted me to promote their situation. But then suddenly they wouldn't come on the show. Very odd. But it's almost the same thing. They're sitting in prison right now because they designed some... What's that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you to tell what they're involved in.
Because they designed the same kind of software, investigative software for use for police investigations and DA's offices, the same type of software. And what they got thrown in prison for was that, because you're not going to believe this, because to run their offices, they hired a temp agency to provide them with employees, and they got stuck on the bill. They couldn't pay the bill. And they got charged with defrauding this temp agency, and that they never had a working software really, and so that they defrauded this temp. Yeah, and they got thrown in prison on this, and it's called like Free the Colorado 7 or whatever it is. I could find the information. I'd really have to dig it up, but I'd find it for you. And it's almost the same thing.
And why would they reluctant to come on the show?
That's a good question. Okay, the woman who came to me first said, "Yeah, we want you to promote this. There's a judge; he'll come on the show." And then they came to me and they said, "Well, there's a guy who talks about this all the time on his Blog Talk radio show, and he'll do the show with you tomorrow afternoon at 11 o'clock." When I talked to the guy tomorrow afternoon, 11 o'clock, he says, "You know what? I talk about this all the time on my show. We really don't need any press." Bizarre.
So are you going to listen to some of his shows and see if it's worth spending more time on?
I never got around to it, but it's something. It's definitely something that should be looked into because it's exact same type of software that you're talking about here, which is.
All right. Well, let me skip back to the circumstances of Danny Casolaro's death.
Yeah.
He had a whole bunch of sources, and some of them were named, and some of them were just referred to by code names. And they weren't just in relation to this Inslaw software case. He basically glommed onto a network of people who were involved in all kinds of different things. But anyway, we first were aware of him when he turned up dead in a Martinsburg, West Virginia hotel under most mysterious circumstances. He was found nude in the bathtub with deep cuts on his wrists, I think both wrists. There was an empty wine bottle in there, but he was not drunk. There was a small level of Tylenol with codeine in his system. But he and his maid, and I think his brother, had all been receiving threats regarding his investigation, telling him to lay off. And he didn't do that. And anyway, he was meeting at least one or two sources over there in West Virginia. I don't know how far he drove, but I think he lived in the D.C. area, so however far that is. He was found dead, and they didn't do an autopsy. They embalmed him without the consultation of his family. When they found out, they were furious about it because they knew what he was investigating and the danger he faced. And they cleaned out the room. They didn't really. They just determined it was a suicide. They embalmed the body, and they tried to wrap their hands of it. But there was, according to something I just got online, there was an unknown man seen leaving Danny Casolaro's room after the suicide by the maid. And we don't know anything. We don't know whether this was a source of his or whether this was the murderer. But anyway, there was this guy seen. And anyway, his briefcase disappeared. So we know he had a briefcase with him, and it wasn't recovered. So.
What about a suicide note? Was there a suicide note?
Bloody bandages found out of his reach. There were a whole lot of mysterious circumstances that indicated it was murder and not suicide.
Was there a suicide note?
No. But apparently there was some note that one of his friends saw at his house that she regarded as a possible suicide note. But it was not found at the scene, and I think it was kind of vague. But this aspect that I'm saying now, I'm not really that up on. But I just found out that there are certain of his friends who claimed that he was despondent and that he was capable of suicide. Now, I don't believe this, and I'm trying to find out more about these people. Every time I find a document with a phone number is, no longer operative. But I'm pretty convinced, and so are most of the people who looked into it, that he was in fact murdered. I mean, just where did the suitcase go, for one thing?
Well, I think also too that his sister said that he was afraid of blood. Didn't even want to go to the doctor and get a needle and stuff like that. And she didn't believe he would slit his wrists. Yeah. Right.
It was, yes, he had a fear of blood, and it was the most unusual way for him to have committed suicide. Plus which, the spin that they're trying to put on it is that, he was frustrated by the fact that he couldn't prove this conspiracy that he was following, and that he was despondent and then took his life. But he told other people that, no, he was on the verge of a big breakthrough, but when he got back from this trip, he'd have it all nailed down. So I really don't think he had the temperament of someone who was frustrated and really kill himself. Now, but there was this very interesting story in the Vanity Fair by Ron Rosenbaum. I don't know if you've heard of him. But anyway, he went into the whole story and the octopus and the various tentacles. And he seemed to be suggesting in his story that, in fact, Danny Casolaro did kill himself, but did it in such a way to make it look like murder. And some of these things I was looking at the other day, these supposed friends of his, were also hinting the same kind of thing. Oh, yeah, he might have done something like that, committed suicide and made it look like a murder, in order to just tweak the research community of the conspiracy buffs to have him chasing their tails after his death. I mean, I don't know. That doesn't sound very likely to me. But I should get to some of the specifics of the other things that he was investigating.
Okay.
There was an Indian reservation out here near Palm Springs called the Cabazon Indians. And what was happening was this Indian reservations were being used by the government to do top-secret projects that they wouldn't have to account for, that were, off-limits to investigators on this Indian land. And they were developing these high-tech weapons for use by the Contras. Now, this was a joint venture on the part of Wackenhut Corporation and the Cabazon Indians. Now, as I said, there was a secret government aspect of testing these weapons, but there was also an organized crime link to this thing, because they were running a gambling casino that they were skimming from. So Danny had a whole bunch of names that he was looking at to do with the Cabazon joint venture. And there was a triple murder that happened. A motorcycle, it was an Indian who used to ride a motorcycle, and his two pals were murdered. And they apparently were objecting, this guy, Alvarez, the guy with the motorcycle, he was objecting to what he was seeing going on the reservation, and he was kind of a influence on the reservation, and he was going to try to, call attention to it and bring a stop to it. And he ended up dead in 1981 along with these two other people. Years later, we found out who the killer was. This guy named Jimmy Hughes, who later became a born-again minister. But he fully confessed his work as an assassin for the government. And I believe in 2009, they extradited him from Florida to California to stand trial on this, and then the last minute they decided not to prosecute him, even with his confession. So that right there raises a huge red flag. You've got an admitted killer, this huge web of sinister activity, and they won't prosecute. Why not?
It's probably because it was connections to Iran-Contra, like you said, right?
Yes. Yeah. there was so much, the corruption that he was investigating seemed to run so deep and so wide that you can see that, they weren't even going to prosecute one aspect of this because for fear, what it would lead to, I guess.
Right.
I never heard that a national security clamp was put on the case, but I mean, that's what it seems to be. Anyway, you can all investigate. This is all, you can check all this. There was a Palm Springs TV station that did like a 33-part series on this whole thing. 33 parts. And that I think is still available on YouTube.
And also, too, you were saying on archive.org, Michael Best is archiving all this information and compiling it all over there.
Yeah, this is a guy that some of us researchers have just discovered in the last month or 2 months. A guy named Michael Best, and he's been uploading like 1 million documents to this archive. A lot of them deal with the Kennedy assassination, the Garrison investigation, the plots against Castro, but a lot of them also deal with the Octopus and the Danny Casolaro death. The two I have in front of me, full text of unknown man seen leaving Danny Casolaro's room after suicide, and then full text of Casolaro notebook. Now, I said that the briefcase was missing, but it does seem like there were a whole lot of documents recovered from his house that then helped people put together a large body of what he was investigating, even though the briefcase did disappear. I believe there was also a note found in his shoe. I forget what that referred to. Now, one of the really sinister guys that seems to be possibly the Mr. Big, at least in terms of maybe eliminating Danny Casolaro, was this guy named Robert Booth Nichols. And it's confusing because there's a John Nichols that was involved with the Indian reservation and who had all these government connections, was involved in Chile. And he's a real shadowy figure, but he's not to be confused. And I believe he's the one who contracted Jimmy Hughes to that murder, the triple murder. I'm not sure of that, but Robert Booth Nichols is one of the main guys that Casolaro latched onto. He was both investigating him and getting information from him. By the way, he's also a friend of this guy, Nichols is a friend of Ted Gunderson's, and I know you're familiar with Gunderson.
Right. Yeah, I've heard the name Robert Booth Nichols before.
He basically is a government fixer, behind the scenes, and he also has all these connections to organized crime, American organized crime, and the Yakuza. And at one point, he sued the L.A. Sheriff's Department over something about carrying a gun or being arrested for carrying a gun in a nightclub. And anyway, he took this to court, and that occasion got the L.A. Times to do a huge piece on the guy, which is probably the most reliable information that went into all his connections, all the intrigues that he was involved with. I think this was before he got involved with Casolaro. I'm not sure. But by the way, this guy also, this is there's a couple of the best texts on this whole thing, Casolaro and the Octopus. There's a book called The Last Circle by Sherry Seymour, who wrote the book under the name Carol Marshall, but her real name is Sherry Seymour. The Last Circle, and then the other one is called The Octopus Conspiracy, I think, by Ken Thomas. But Robert Booth Nichols, apparently he liked to impress his friends and intimidate them or show how big he was or his connections. And apparently one of the things he used to do was show a copy of the Zapruder film to his guests. And apparently, as I remember, it was the so-called version where the driver turns around and shoots Kennedy.
Right.
Which is which is bogus. So if he's showing that version of the film, then I don't know what kind of game he's playing there. There's a possibility he's playing the reputed version of the Zapruder film that's longer than the other one, that shows the motorcade turning onto Elm Street, whereas the extant film doesn't show that, and then it shows some more stuff later on that's supposed to be not on the new film. And there's various people that claim to have seen this version of the film, which also shows the blood lasting for a lot more frames than the one that we have. But people have claimed that they've seen this film, but, no one's ever produced it, so it's kind of a shadowy thing. But
wait, let me ask you a question.
My belief is
when was he showing this film? Before Geraldo released the film?
Now, you're talking about these people that have seen the longer film, or this phone film that was basically rigged up by Bill Cooper or promoted by Bill Cooper that shows the driver shooting.
I'm asking about Nichols. You said he was having private showings to his friends, so he had a private copy before it went public?
No, I think this would have been afterwards. This would have been afterwards.
Okay, gotcha. But he was showing the Bill Cooper version.
I think so.
Okay.
That's my impression.
Okay.
And that's kind of a sideline. But there are connections between the Octopus and the Kennedy assassination, and I may get to that. But anyway, I was told by an investigative reporter for the Fresno Bee. Now, I already referred to two I don't know if I did. There was two Justice Department investigations of the Inslaw matter, and they also investigated the circumstances of Danny Casolaro's death. One was conducted by Judge Bua, and that was basically a cover-up investigation. And there was then a later investigation conducted by Judge by Judge Basin. And he really took the Justice Department to task. He ruled against them in the suit and said that they were guilty of fraud, trickery, and deceit. And another part of the trial, he said he just couldn't believe the things that the Justice Department was not disputing about how they ripped off the Hamiltons on all the mysterious circumstances and just blatant, abuse of power. And so that investigation was much closer to the truth of what really happened. And I was told by an investigative reporter for the Fresno Bee that he had a good source on the committee, and that source told him that they were going to recommend that Robert Booth Nichols be charged with either killing Danny or having ordered the death of Danny Casolaro. So they really saw him as the likely perpetrator. But because of the circumstances of the case, and by the same reason they didn't prosecute Jimmy Hughes for the murder of the Alvarez and the other two Indians, they did not include that in the report. They did not say that they suspected Robert Booth Nichols killed Casolaro. That was left out for whatever reason.
Is Nichols alive today?
Nichols died very mysteriously in Geneva in 2009, and the circumstances were... Bloomberg, by the way, did a big article about this. The circumstances were such that people were wondering whether the death was faked. Now, sometime near to that incident, as I said, this guy was a real big fixer, and he dealt with extraordinary sums of money, but he was like a con man type. You really couldn't tell what was real and what was puffery. But at some point, he went to the Bank of London and tried to cash a check in the amount of $250 billion. Now, and that... they didn't cash it. I think I don't know if they arrested him, but it caused a big flap. Well, I'll say a big flap. It should have caused a big flap. I guess it caused a small flap because it was underreported. But it did make some news sources, just as his death did.
He should have just deposited
none
the
of
check.
These people are exactly in the vernacular, are well known. I mean, including Casolaro. I wouldn't say Casolaro is a well known figure either. But,
And he should have just deposited the check, right? Instead of asking for cash. Unless he had a train with him. Can you imagine all the cash, even $100 bills, man? You'd need a train. He couldn't even put in a truck, Listen, let's take a look.
I forget what the check was associated with, some arms deals, or I don't know what it was. stolen gold.
Listen, we're at the 30-minute mark.
It was so bizarre.
Let's take a little commercial break, okay? Just a minute.
Okay.
We'll take a 1-minute break, and then we'll be back with more of Ted Rubinstein. A lot of the stuff he's talking about you could find on archive.org. And Ted, like we said, he's not promoting anything, just a well-seasoned researcher and investigator for years and years and years. Goes back to Mae Brussels and Dave Emery and Larry Flint. And now he's just working freelance and giving me tips every now and then. Thank you very much. We'll be right back with more with Ted Rubinstein after these messages. Okay. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company located in India. So you know you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service to boot. They offer all kinds of services, business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshore research networking, customer care, press release content writing and distribution, and much, much more. They offer website development, e-commerce solutions, mobile responsive designs. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. You can find a link to Subash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also AwakeRadio.us. Welcome to our new sponsor. And now a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 30% of all people on online dating websites and personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship? 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. Our online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address, and we can trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast. Alistair. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and we're here with Ted Rubinstein, talking about Danny Casolaro and the Octopus. Danny, before we get back to that, now this guy Michael Best from archive.org, you mentioned how he's uploading, suddenly this guy shows up on the scene and he's uploading truckloads of documents. Do we know this guy's background and where he's getting a hold of all these documents?
He's researched them at the National Archives. Now, he was interviewed by my friend Doug Campbell last week. Can I mention another show?
Yeah, sure, you can.
Oh, okay, yes, because we conducted the first known interview that we have with this guy since he popped up. Doug Campbell of the show The Dallas Action interviewed him. I think it's show number 92. I think you can find it by looking at The Dallas Action.
Yeah, that's on Spreaker, too. You can find that on Spreaker really easy. Dallas Action, guys.
Yeah. So now he interviewed him mainly about the Kennedy assassination documents he's been uploading. He didn't ask him anything about the Octopus. But I'm very interested in talking to the guy myself because I thought it was fascinating that he's uploading so many documents on both these subjects. And then there is an overlap. Another overlap besides that the Truder film that I mentioned, or whatever film that is. It's Cooper film. There's another connection there, which is Robert Booth Nichols was on the board of a company called FIDCO, First International Development Company or something, and also another one called Meridian Arms. Meridian was always an arms company. I forget what Fidco's ostensible business was. But also on the board of directors, along with Robert Booth Nichols, were two gentlemen that a lot of us are familiar with. One of them being Robert Mayhew.
Oh, boy.
And the other being the oil man Clint Murchison out of Texas, who some people claim that the assassination was finalized at a party at his house the night before. But that's dubious. But anyway, Murchison is a very, very important oil man with organized crime connections and connections to Johnson. And, he's right up there with H.L. Hunt in terms of his influence in the Texas oil scene. He was on the board of directors. Clint Murchison Jr., one of them. He also owned the Dallas Cowboys at one point. There's senior and junior. It's junior, the one who was on the board of directors with Nichols, and Robert Mayhew, another illustrious figure. And we know him from having worked for Howard Hughes, having been the point man between the CIA and the Mafia on the plots to kill Castro, using Johnny Roselli.
Yeah, he lived here in Vegas and had extensive connections with the casinos here in Las Vegas. He had I think it was called Mayhew International, and did PI work for the casinos over here. And then his son, Peter, after Mayhew, Bob died, his son, Peter, had huge PI contracts here with the casinos as well. And he just died, too, as well, just recently.
This is the son?
Yeah, Peter. Yeah, Peter's dead.
Oh, okay. There's also a story that comes from another Hughes aide named John Meyer from Canada, and he's a notorious con man. And there's a book about him called Age of Secrets, which is all about his connections to the CIA and Watergate and a whole bunch of swindles and other intrigues. He claims he did know Mayhew. Now, he came out years later after Mayhew died and claimed that Mayhew was involved in the Robert Kennedy assassination, specifically through the security guard Thane Caesar. Now, Meyer says that Mayhew introduced him to Thane Caesar. We do know that Thane Caesar did work for Hughes, and he did work for Lockheed as a guard. Now, there's another guy who supposedly can corroborate this, an ex-LA cop called John Hooper, who was also named by Meyer. I don't know anything about him, but as I said, this is kind of a one-source bombshell allegation that it's mentioned in Talbot's book and Lisa Pease of this Citizens for the Truth About the Kennedy Assassination. She's written about it too, but it's not in that book I mentioned, Age of Secrets. It doesn't mention this. He came forward with this after the initial publication of the book. There's now a new edition of it, apparently, where he does include this information, and apparently he has some excerpts from a notebook that he supposedly kept at the time. But anyway, he claims that. And he also claims that he had a conversation with Hoover after this, and that Hoover told him separately that the killing of RFK was, quote unquote, a Mayhew job, and we couldn't do anything about it.
Ah, really?
Now, the bottom line is that Meyer did have a whole lot of interesting connections, but he is a convicted con man, and without some sort of corroboration, I really don't know how reliable the story is. But
hey, what do you make about?
I mean, I'm convinced Mayhew's involved in so much stuff.
Oh yeah,
it's right.
What do you make of Sirhan
He was involved
Sirhan?
in the Guatemala coup and not Guatemala, Dominican Republic, the intrigues around the murder of this dissident named Galindez in New York City for the Trujillo family. Mayhew was involved up to his neck with it, which is why I guess the CIA tapped him later on in the 60s, the Castro plot.
Hey, did I ever send you that scan I have of the INS report that says that Sirhan Sirhan went to Process Church sex parties, drug and sex parties, and that he was at Sharon Tate's house? Yeah, what do you make of that stuff, man?
I don't know. Sirhan had a bunch of interesting things in his notebook that one could, make a big deal about. But He references New York to Narcos, and Narcos was also involved with Mayhew in business dealings in the 50s, and that involved Robert Kennedy. What was that in the 60s? I don't know. So, yeah, very interesting stuff in Sirhan's notebook and in his writings. I don't know where to take that, but yeah, you mentioned one of them. Now, I also want to mention one other tentacle of the Octopus involved the MCA Corporation and the I think it was the Gambino and the Genovese families. They had this rip-off going on involving the cutout records, and this was investigated in the 1980s. And Robert Booth Nichols was associated with some of the people, the Gambinos, and the organized crime figures that were involved in this rip-off of MCA. But MCA is a very shadowy company of its own, and it was owned by Lou Wasserman. And he had all kinds of, mob connections. And anyway, there's one book about MCA called Stift. This is by an LA Times writer, and there's a Justice Department official that's featured in that book called Marvin Rudnick, and he's one of the good guys at the Justice Department who was trying to go after some of this stuff, going after this tentacle of the octopus. And a friend of mine had a lot of interesting talks with Marvin Rudnick, so he's definitely a good guy, and he's featured in this book called Stift, which is about MCA and the organized crime and the ripoff involving the cutout records. There's also a book called MCA, Reagan and the Mob by Dan Moldea, which sort of gives the background on how Reagan was tied in with these people and Wasserman and the organized crime connections going back, even before this thing involving the cutout records.
How about Al Sharpton? Does he pop up in any of that?
Not that I know of.
Because that would be right up his alley and would explain so much of that would be right up his alley. His connections to Roger Stone, running around all these, because he was all these guys in the music industry. The Genovese family was going after, the Gambino family was going after, making cases for the FBI when he's walking around with that briefcase with the recorder in it. There's got to be, and I would explain why he's untouchable now. You know what I mean? Guy doesn't have to pay his taxes. I would love to find out what's going on with that.
And this was when he was working for the FBI?
Yeah.
And then doing drug deals and stuff. We're talking about drug deals.
The drug deal thing is minimal. He was when I really was looking into that, I concluded that he was working for the FBI before the drug deals, and he was making cases against mafia guys in New York City and music industry guys. He was doing collections. He was collecting money for artists and stuff from these music producers and stuff. But this is all, that seems like all, and he has so many connections too to, he got Coretta Scott King into that box at the convention sitting next to George Bush. That was his deal. He's been working for the Republicans in New York for a very long time and sheepdogging for them. It was Roger Stone who managed his campaign when he was running for president in order to split the Democratic vote. And he even said, too, in interviews, he says, these campaigns I lost, you don't know my motivation for running for those campaigns. You don't know why I ran for that office. I had my own reasons. You know what I mean? So, and here he is now, man, Mr. Untouchable. Pays no taxes, does whatever he wants. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let me, I'm going to, if I've got a few minutes, I'll start to bring up stuff that I've just encountered in the last few days through these documents that Michael Best uploaded. And I've just really started to pour through some of this stuff. I really want to go through the notebook.
Well, give us an overview.
We
got about 15 minutes left, so give us an overview,
Okay. Well, one note I made, Hamilton, who was the developer of the software, said he was told by a source, confidential source, that Casolaro was injected with ethyl alcohol absolute. That he was injected with it just above the spine. that they have the lot number for this drug, the long, detailed lot number, supposedly, and that it came from the U.S. Army inventory.
Oh, wow.
Now, this whole thing sounds bizarre. I never heard about this before, this allegation that he was killed with being injected with pure alcohol, and that they would have a lot number for this, and that they could trace it to the U.S. Army inventory. That's very bizarre.
Are the Hamiltons still alive?
I don't know. I would imagine so, but I don't know.
Okay.
Another aspect of that I knew that a lot of the stuff that he was investigating involved drugs. Drugs involving organized crime families, even maybe in MENA, but I'm not sure about that. He was definitely investigating heroin trafficking coming into the Northeast in containers. There's this one part there where he talks about the big city diner in New York and Gotti's chauffeur having been murdered there in 1991. And then he goes into this shadowy guy named George Ocon of Peekskill, New York, and how he was being investigated for a long time by the CHIPS. He calls it CHIPS, which I think that's some kind of it's an NSA program, or it's a FinCEN, Financial Crime Center. I forget what CHIPS stands for, but he talks about this guy being surveilled, and that they believe that he's involved in this massive shipment of heroin.
You know that's interesting, because the Genovese would had containers coming in through Port Newark. That would make sense. And the guy you're talking about, Gotti's driver who got killed, is that the Chico?
No, it wouldn't be to Chico.
Okay.
I don't think.
Okay.
I'm going to have to. I'm in a couple of mob groups in Facebook, and maybe they can help me.
Okay.
They also Ralph D. Simone.
Not Bellotti. Wouldn't be
91.
Wouldn't be Bellotti. Castellano's driver, right? Bellotti? No.
No, Bellotti was killed in '85 with Castellano.
Okay.
Now this is really interesting. There's a reference in there to these people like Ocon and Earl Bryan. I didn't mention his name. He's one of the main guys. You see, a lot of these are all Reagan Department. These corrupt people in the Justice Department were all Reagan appointees. Ed Meese was a real big heavy in this investigation, and another guy even more deeply involved was Earl Bryan. Now he was involved with a lot of tech companies, and he was involved with trips to Iran and the October surprise, that kind of thing. Those are the allegations. And he was also, for a while, that he owned UPI, which then went into bankruptcy. And anyway, he supposedly was suspected by Casolaro of being involved somehow in this heroin, along with this George Ocon. Now, I believe Ocon is still. I've only come across that last guy's name just in the last 48 hours. He just really seems mysterious. It also mentions a Nick Adamo, a crime figure out of Yorkshire Heights, New York. I'm going to have to look some more about him.
That name sounds very familiar.
Okay, now this is really interesting to me, because there's a reference here to a training camp in Reliance, Tennessee, and that some of these people like Bryan and Ocon somehow might have a connection to this Christian Defense League training camp. And they also mentioned the JDL in connection with this training camp.
Oh, really?
Now, there's this incredible article about the Christian Defense League and its relationship to the milieu of the Kennedy assassination. And in fact, some of these people, I've been doing some research in this very aspect of it, like organized crime ties, anti-Castro people, and people with organized crime ties, all tie into this Christian Defense League nexus. And it's just one of a multitude of these far right-wing organizations like the Minutemen that were operating at the time. But when I saw the Christian Defense League also popping up in Danny Casolaro's notes, God, how bizarre is this?
Real quick, we got like 10 minutes left. And what about Vince Foster? Somehow there was a story that Vince Foster had a check involving all this. What's the deal with that?
Okay. Vince Foster is definitely part of this milieu. First of all, because he was involved with Waco, overseeing the Clintons' role in Waco as their attorney, I guess. And some of these Justice Department officials that Casolaro was investigating, like this Zipperstein, I don't know if I mentioned him on the air or off the air, but Zipperstein is one of the guys who was involved with Waco, and others were involved with Waco too. And anyway, so Vince Foster apparently had a Swiss bank account in Geneva that was frozen at the direction of a CIA faction. And then when he discovered that his bank account had been frozen, or I forget whether it was frozen or that the funds had been totally taken out of it, but it was at that point that he supposedly went into a real panic, and it was shortly after that he was found dead. I believe it is pretty well confirmed that he did that he was tied to this bank account. Now, the details, I think, are, much debated. But it does seem to tie into the whole thing. I can't tell you exactly what the connection is. I can tell you another thing that's interesting to me. Have you heard of this guy, Leo Wanta?
Yes.
This ties into this, Vince Foster.
Yeah, what do you got on it?
Leo Wanta is the so-called $27 trillion man who supposedly helped Reagan destabilize the Russian currency. And there was this huge fund that he claimed the rights to, which with interest amounted to $27 trillion. And he's been trying to get access to these funds ever since. And which he claims he wants to contribute to the U.S. Treasury, to cancel the debt or something. But anyway, it's hard to know how much of this guy's story is true, but at least aspects of it definitely are corroborated in reliable sources. But whether his whole story, as he tells it, and I can't get into the details for this short time, are true, I don't know. But he claims that he was on his way to Geneva to meet Vincent Foster with a check in the amount of $250,000 that it was going to Hillary's favorite charity at the time, the Children's Defense Fund, and that when he went for this meeting with Vince Foster, he was arrested by the Swiss authorities and sent back to the United States to face some kind of fraud charge in Wisconsin, which was, I guess, the start of all his legal problems and trying to get recoup that money and all that stuff. But anyway, he claims that he was on his way to meet Foster with a check that was, by the way, a lot smaller than the one that Robert Bruce Nichols had.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a quarter of a million or something. And anyway, he claims he was arrested at this meeting with Vince Foster.
We're definitely going to have you come back. Maybe we'll bring this guy Michael Best too, or one of the other guys you have with, and we'll do like another 2-hour show to cover all the little details on this, because there's just so much here involved. Interesting that one of the guys, one of the guys I just had on about Vince Foster said to me he didn't think that the Hillary and Bill killed Vince Foster. He thought it was way above them, much higher than them, and a foreign intelligence. He thought it was, and that Vince Foster was involved in a lot of bigger stuff than Bill and Hillary.
And I suppose he's hinting at Mossad, right? Because Mossad is involved in that aspect of it. Well,
what did you come up with?
Suggesting?
I don't know. What did you come up with?
Well, I just know that these dealings with the banks and the money and the blackmailing of Hillary Clinton, including, do you remember when he told Monica that he thought the Israelis were listening to him?
Yes, I do remember
or something like that.
Yeah.
So yes, if this guy was suggesting a foreign intelligence service, that would seem to be what he's hinting at.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left. What do you think we can bring out here to sum this up?
Well, I don't know. I think people should take a look at the files that were uploaded there and try to track some of these things, because there's so many aspects of the thing, and let me talk about another real briefly. It sort of involves not just one group of criminals, but there was another group of criminals that were in the Bay Area, run by this guy named Philip Arthur Thompson. And in I guess it was the 80s, the San Francisco Examiner had a big series of stories about this criminal ring that were involved in the drugs, arms, and something in Latin America. And the reason it was all in the press attention is because some woman had come into their orbit and then been murdered. Her name was Valerie McDonald. And we were very interested in this case at the time, and Dave Emery covered it. And it wasn't until years later that I discovered that the Philip Arthur Thompson crime ring was part of the Octopus that Casolaro was investigating. And there was another murder in San Francisco of a guy named Paul Maraska. That was tied into both crime rings. And, what was I going to say? Well, I forget now.
What year was the Paul Maraska murder?
Maraska?
Yeah.
I believe 1981. Oh, I know. That was going to bring me to Michael Riconosciuto. I don't know.
Right.
Riconosciuto was one of the main sources, and he sort of was the crossover between these two crime rings, now that I come to think of it. He was maybe the linchpin. And when he started to come out with all his revelations about the Octopus and the intrigue, he was locked up for methamphetamine trafficking in Washington State, and that sort of put a muzzle on all the things he was saying. But he just had so many allegations that just went all over the place. Some of it checked out and some of it didn't. But he was a hell of a witness. I don't know whether he's still alive now or not. Riconosciuto.
Let me ask you a question. You hear Stu Webb talking about these things all the time. What do you make of that, of his investigation, his involvement in all these kind of theories?
Well, he's one of these guys that he makes it a little too much about him.
Right.
And he's always talking about a Leonard Millman out of Denver.
Daddy Bush, Poppy
he's
Bush.
big on mentioning Jewish names. I'm not really too impressed by him, all in all.
Yeah, and, you can just push a button and it'll go with that Leonard Millman, Daddy Bush, Papa Bush. But yeah, I know. But he is a charming guy in some ways. I don't know. Well, we're out of time, my friend. Ted Rubinstein, we're out of time. Listen, but we got to come back and really, I thank you for coming here at the last second and helping me tonight. We got to come back and really explore this whole story. Maybe we need like 3 or 4 shows, just to really cover everything on it. This guy Michael Best, does he have more stuff coming out?
Sorry?
Michael Best, does he have more documents that he's putting out? He puts out more every day?
Oh yeah, he uploads so many of them, and I don't know how this. I don't know if he's paying for it or whether they give it to him free, or I've got to talk to him and find out some of these details about how he's running this thing. He did go into how the CIA clamped down on his access after he made a message on Facebook. He's convinced that they somehow came across that and made his access more difficult in terms of being able to stick a
Michael Best at archive.org. We're out of time.
6. Yeah.
Ted Rubinstein, thank you so much. We talked about Danny Casolaro and the Octopus. Ted Rubinstein, a historical icon in the field of research. Thank you so much, Ted.
You're welcome.